When my cousin laughed and called my art degree a fancy piece of toilet paper, something inside me snapped. I felt my face flush hot and I saw my dad glance away, pretending he hadn't heard. My mom fidgeted with her lemonade, her eyes darting from my cousin to me, silently begging me not to make a scene. My little sister Mia stood frozen next to the grill, her jaw open as she watched the moment unravel. Brian, my cousin, had always been the loudest at every family gathering, the kind of guy who thinks his jokes are hilarious even when they cut deep. He wore his backward baseball cap and his big sales bro grin, convinced that he was the only real success story in the family. I'm Lila. I'm 29 years old and I have a degree in fine arts. My dad, Greg, never believed in it. He thought art was a waste of time, a hobby for rich kids who didn't need to worry about bills. He's a mechanic, a man who measures worth by calloused hands and steady paychecks. My mom, Janet, has always been gentle, the kind of woman who cries during commercials and hums while she washes dishes. But she never stood up for me when Dad dismissed my work. Mia, my 22-year-old sister, is my secret weapon, the one person in my corner since I first picked up a paintbrush. She's studying environmental science, but she's always believed I was meant to do something big. That day at the BBQ felt like every other family gathering. The smell of burgers, the sticky sweetness of barbecue sauce, my dad in his faded King of the Grill apron, and Brian tossing around insults like cheap party favors. Except this time, I wasn't going to swallow it. I had spent years staying quiet, letting them laugh at my useless degree, listening to them praise Brian for his latest commission or sales trip. Every time I tried to talk about my art, someone changed the subject or made a joke about starving artists. But today, I had a secret they didn't know. A secret that made my hands tremble with excitement and anger all at once. My latest painting had just sold for $120,000 to a private collector in New York. I had signed the paperwork only a few days earlier, and I still felt that wild, disbelieving rush every time I thought about it. As Brian laughed, my dad gave that small, gruff chuckle he does when he doesn't want to pick sides, but still wants to feel included. My mom reached out to touch my arm gently, trying to soothe me, but her soft touch only reminded me how long I had let this happen. Mia looked straight at me, her eyes sharp and bright, silently screaming at me to finally do something. I took a slow breath and felt a new kind of fire settle into my chest. No more polite smiles, no more quiet nods, no more pretending that my art didn't matter. I had worked too hard, given up too much sleep, poured too many pieces of my soul into every brushstroke to keep pretending I was small. At that moment, I made a choice. I was going to show them exactly what they had been laughing at all these years. I was going to prove that the girl they thought was lost and naive had built something bigger than they ever imagined. And when I saw the way Mia's eyes lit up as she realized what I was about to do, I knew I wasn't just doing it for me. I was doing it for every version of myself that had stayed silent in the past. The morning of the BBQ, I woke up to the sound of birds outside my window and the faint hum of my neighbor's lawnmower. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection for a moment longer than usual. My hair was tied up in a messy bun, paint still stuck under my fingernails from a late-night session the day before. I felt a quiet rush of pride as I thought about that painting, the one that would change everything. But beneath it all, a nervous tension curled in my stomach. Today wasn't just another family BBQ. I had been waiting years for this moment, even if I hadn't planned it to happen exactly like this. I pulled on a simple white dress splattered lightly with pastel colors from when I leaned against my studio walls. To me, it felt like armor, a reminder that no matter what they said, I belonged to my art. As I packed a big bowl of pasta salad, I heard my mom's voice in my head, reminding me to bring something normal that everyone would eat. But I ignored it this time. I wanted to bring something that felt like me, even if no one touched it. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, I could already hear laughter echoing from the backyard. I stepped out of the car and paused for a second, taking a deep breath. The familiar scent of charcoal and sweet barbecue sauce drifted through the summer air. Kids were running around the lawn, shrieking as they chased each other with water guns. I walked through the side gate, balancing the salad in one hand and my keys in the other, and there they all were, the cast of characters that had shaped so much of my life. My dad stood at the grill, flipping burger patties with a seriousness he reserved only for cooking and fixing engines. His faded, king of the grill apron was streaked with mustard and grease, and he wore a baseball cap that shaded his eyes. He barely looked up as I arrived, just gave a quick nod before turning back to the meat sizzling in front of him. That was his way of greeting me. My mom hovered nearby, arranging paper plates and napkins on the folding table. She glanced up when she saw me, her eyes softening, and she came over to take the salad bowl from my hands. "You look beautiful today, Lila," she said, giving me a quick one-armed hug. Her voice was gentle, but there was always a tremor beneath it, as though she were constantly walking on a tightrope between my dad's expectations and her own quiet hopes for me. Then there was Brian, my cousin, already holding court in the center of the patio. He leaned back in his chair, a half-eaten burger in one hand and a beer in the other, recounting some story about a big sale he had just closed. His voice boomed over the music, making people laugh at all the right moments, even when the jokes weren't funny. He'd always been the golden boy at these gatherings, praised for every small victory, even if it was just getting a new car or booking a fancy vacation. Mia was off to the side, arranging the cooler full of sodas and sparkling water. When she saw me, she practically sprinted over, almost knocking into the table. She threw her arms around me, squeezing tight. "I missed you," she said, pulling back to look me up and down like she was making sure I was really there. I smiled, brushing a stray hair from her forehead. She was my anchor, my biggest supporter, the only one who ever came to my art shows and stood by my side when no one else even asked how it went. As I set the salad down on the table, I watched my family move around me in a comfortable rhythm they had practiced for years. The music changed to an old rock song my dad loved, and he tapped the spatula against the grill in time to the beat. Brian's laughter roared again as he leaned forward, throwing his head back dramatically. My mom gave him a tired smile, probably too polite to tell him he was being obnoxious. I felt like a ghost moving through them, seen but not really understood. Even now, after all the years I had spent pouring my heart into my work, they still saw me as the kid who spent too much time doodling in notebooks, the one who'd grow out of it eventually. Every polite question about my little projects felt like a dagger dipped in honey, and I had learned to answer them with a tight smile and a quick subject change. But that day was different. That day, I had something powerful in my trunk, something that would make them stop, even if just for a moment. I knew I could stay quiet, let Brian dominate the conversation, and my dad make his quiet jokes about real work. I could keep playing my role, the harmless daydreamer in a family of practical people. But as I watched Mia watch me, her eyes silently urging me on, I felt the old fear start to crumble. I had spent my whole life trying to prove my worth to them in quiet ways, bringing food, helping clean up, fading into the background so they wouldn't be embarrassed by me. But standing there that afternoon, in the thick summer heat and the smell of burning charcoal, I realized I wasn't going to fade anymore. I had come with more than pasta salad. I had come with proof. I tried to settle in like I always did, moving quietly around the backyard, refilling drinks, and helping Mom set out the condiments. But my mind wasn't really in it. I felt that painting in my car like a heartbeat, steady and strong, pulsing with every breath I took. I could hear Brian's voice dominating the yard, his stories getting louder as more beers disappeared from the cooler. As I passed by the patio table, I heard Brian talking to my dad about his new sales bonus. He bragged about the commission check, saying he was thinking about putting a down payment on a boat. Dad nodded along approvingly, his eyes lighting up at the mention of big money. Then Brian turned, his eyes landing on me like a spotlight. "Hey, Lila," he called out, his voice thick with amusement. "How's that painting thing going? Sold any doodles to your high school friends lately?" I forced a polite smile, the kind I had perfected after years of these small humiliations. "It's going pretty well." I said softly, trying to move past him. But Brian wasn't finished. He leaned back in his chair and took a long swig of his beer like he was gearing up for a performance. "You know, man," he said to my dad, loud enough for everyone to hear, "it's wild how people waste money on college degrees, especially art degrees. I mean, what can you even do with that? Hang out in your parents' basement finger painting? At least with my business degree, I can actually pay my bills." A few uncles laughed, even though their eyes darted away quickly, as if they felt guilty for joining in. My mom looked like she wanted to sink into the ground, her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt. Mia froze where she stood, gripping a can of sparkling water so tight I thought it might burst. My dad chuckled. That low, uncomfortable sound I knew too well. "Well, he's got a point," he said, shrugging without looking at me. "Hard to make a living in art. You need something real to fall back on." His words didn't even sound cruel, just tired and dismissive, as if he'd repeated them so many times he believed them more than he believed in me. I felt something inside me start to crack open, a sharp ache blooming in my chest. All the nights I had spent alone in my studio, pushing through exhaustion. All the mornings I woke up to rejection emails, but still picked up the brush again. It all rushed up in one hot wave. My hands started shaking, and I clenched them into fists at my sides, my nails digging into my palms. Mia finally spoke up, her voice shaking but firm. "Actually, Lila's amazing. She's had her work shown in galleries. People love her art." Her words came out fast, almost like she was afraid they'd be snatched away. Brian snorted, rolling his eyes dramatically. "Galleries? Oh, please. Must be some dusty coffee shop walls. Next you'll tell me she's the next Van Gogh or something." He cackled, slapping his thigh like he had just made the joke of the year. The laughter that followed felt like nails on a chalkboard. Every chuckle sliced through me, but at the same time, each one fueled that fire building in my gut. I had spent so many years trying to stay small, trying not to embarrass my family, trying not to make anyone uncomfortable with my dreams. But standing there, watching Mia's face go red with frustration, I realized I wasn't protecting anyone by staying silent. I was just letting them bury me alive, one joke at a time. I looked at my dad, hoping for one moment of eye contact, one flicker of understanding, but he avoided my gaze, turning instead to flip another burger on the grill. I realized then that he might never see me the way I wanted him to. But that didn't mean I had to keep proving myself to him. My breath felt sharp in my chest, like I had been underwater and finally broke the surface. I turned and started walking toward the side gate. My mom called after me softly, her voice thin and worried. Mia took a step forward, but I shook my head, silently telling her to wait. I felt all the eyes on my back, some curious, some mocking. But for the first time, I didn't feel small under their stares. I felt strong. As I reached the gate and opened it, a breeze brushed over my face, and I knew, with every part of me, that I was done shrinking. The painting was waiting, and so was the truth I had kept hidden for far too long. I stepped out through the side gate, my heartbeat thundering so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The sun was high now, beating down on my shoulders as I walked across the driveway to my car. My fingers trembled slightly as I dug into my pocket for my keys. Every step felt like peeling away an old, heavy layer of skin. All the polite smiles, the forced small talk, the swallowed words. Today, I was done carrying all of that weight. When I popped open my trunk, the smell of fresh paint hit me, grounding me instantly. My latest piece sat there, carefully wrapped in protective cloth. It was the biggest canvas I had ever worked on, almost as tall as I was. I had poured every sleepless night, every rejection email, every quiet tear and moment of doubt into this piece. It wasn't just a painting, it was my story. My heart stretched across a blank surface and transformed into something undeniable. I carefully lifted it out, feeling its familiar weight settle against my arms. As I turned toward the backyard again, I saw Mia standing by the gate, her eyes wide and bright. She looked at the painting, then at me. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I gave her a small nod. She understood. She always did. I started walking back, each step heavy and deliberate. The sounds from the backyard grew louder again. Brian's laughter, the clink of beer bottles, the low murmur of my dad's voice. They had no idea what was coming. I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration bubble up in my chest. Part of me wondered if I would collapse from the weight of all those years of silence finally breaking open. But another part of me, the part that had stayed up until dawn working on pieces no one thought would sell, the part that had shown up to every tiny gallery opening, no matter how few people came, felt stronger than ever. When I stepped back into the yard, all conversation stopped. Every head turned toward me, eyes flicking from the huge canvas in my arms to my face, trying to make sense of what was happening. Brian's smirk faltered for the first time, his mouth twitching as he straightened in his chair. My dad froze mid-flip, the spatula in his hand hovering over the grill. My mom's eyes went wide, her hand covering her mouth as if she were holding in a scream. I kept walking until I reached the patio, then gently propped the painting against the side of the table, making sure it wouldn't tip or get splattered by stray drops of barbecue sauce. My chest rose and fell quickly, my fingers still curled tightly around the edge of the canvas, as if I had to physically hold on to my courage. I looked up, meeting each pair of stunned eyes. Then I cleared my throat, and for the first time all afternoon, my voice didn't shake. "This," I said, tapping the side of the canvas lightly, "is what I've been working on. This piece just sold last week to a private collector in New York." Silence. Complete, consuming silence. Even the kids stopped running, their water guns dripping onto the grass as they watched the adults freeze. I looked directly at Brian and added, "It sold for $120,000. His burger slipped right out of his hand, landing with a soft thud on the patio stones. He didn't even notice. His eyes darted from the canvas to me and back again, as if waiting for someone to jump out and yell, "Gotcha!" My dad turned red, really red, the kind of red I hadn't seen since I accidentally spilled paint on his favorite tool cabinet as a teenager. My mom let out a tiny gasp and staggered forward, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch the corner of the painting. "Lila," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Oh my God!" Mia was the first to actually move. She let out a sharp, joyful laugh and started clapping, the sound cutting through the shocked silence like a spark. "I knew it!" she shouted, jumping up and down. "I knew you were going to make it big. I told you all." Her excitement poured out of her in bright, unstoppable waves, and I felt it wash over me, lifting me even higher. Brian opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked like he wanted to say something clever, some snarky comeback, but instead he just sat there, his face pale and stunned. My dad took a step forward, his eyes locked on the painting, his mouth opening and closing as if he were fighting with words that had never come easily to him. I stood there, breathing hard, feeling my pulse in every inch of my body. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for permission or waiting for their approval. I was just standing in my truth, finally and fully. I watched them, really watched them, as the weight of my words finally landed. For the first time in my life, I saw their expressions crack open. Brian sat there, his hands frozen in the air like he'd been mid-gesture, his burger lying forgotten on the ground. His eyes darted around wildly, looking for someone to laugh along with him, but nobody did. The smirk that had always lived so comfortably on his face slowly slid off, leaving behind a stunned, naked confusion. My dad took another step forward. His face was flushed deep red, the same color it turned when the car wouldn't start on a cold winter morning. But this time, it wasn't just anger. It was disbelief, shock, and something else I had been aching to see for years. The glimmer of pride he tried so hard to bury. He stepped right up to the painting, so close that I worried he might smudge the fresh varnish with his calloused fingers. His eyes flicked over every brushstroke, every detail. I could see his jaw working, like he was chewing on words he had never practiced saying out loud. My mom's hands covered her mouth, but tears had already started slipping down her cheeks. She kept shaking her head, not in denial but in wonder, as if she couldn't believe she was finally seeing me, really seeing me. She took a hesitant step closer, then reached out to gently touch my arm, as if to make sure I wouldn't disappear. Mia rushed to my side and grabbed my hand so tightly it almost hurt. Her eyes were bright and glassy, her cheeks flushed from excitement. "I told them, Lila," she said, her voice rising with each word. "I told them you were going to be huge. I always knew. I always knew." She turned to the rest of the yard, her free hand gesturing wildly. "You all laughed at her. You thought she was wasting her time, but look at her now." I looked at her and squeezed her hand back, feeling the warmth and loyalty that had kept me going through the loneliest nights in my studio. Brian finally managed to find his voice, though it sounded small and uncertain. That's a joke, right? You're making this up. No one pays that much for a painting." His voice cracked halfway through, and he cleared his throat, trying to sound confident again, but the words fell flat in the heavy silence. I turned my gaze directly to him, holding it steady. "It's not a joke, Brian. It's sold to a private collector in New York for $120,000. The contract is signed. The wire transfer is complete. This isn't some coffee shop sketch or a charity auction. This is real." I could see him shrink under my words, his shoulders curling forward like he was trying to make himself invisible. His eyes flicked to the ground, his face pale and tight, and he didn't say another word. My dad finally spoke. His voice was rough and low, like gravel under a tire. I didn't know," he said, each word slow and heavy. He reached out toward the canvas again, but stopped just short of touching it, his fingers hovering in the air. "I didn't know you were doing all this. I thought you were just messing around." I felt my chest tighten, but not in the old painful way. This time, it felt like something was breaking open, making space for something new. I took a small step forward, closer to him. "I've always been working, Dad. Even when you thought it was nothing, I've been building this for years." He nodded once, then again, each movement stiff and uncertain. His eyes finally met mine, and in them, I saw years of unspoken words and locked away feelings swirl to the surface. He swallowed hard and muttered, I'm proud of you, kid." The words sounded strange and clumsy in his mouth, but they were real. The air around us shifted in that moment. The yard that had always felt like enemy territory suddenly felt like neutral ground. My mom stepped closer and wrapped her arms around me, burying her face into my shoulder as she sobbed softly. Mia joined in, hugging both of us at once, laughing and crying in the same breath. I looked past them at my painting, gleaming in the sun. The brushstrokes looked alive, dancing in the light, the same way I felt inside, alive, bright, unstoppable. For the first time in my life, I stood there not as the joke, not as the family's odd disappointment, but as the artist, the woman who had turned her useless art degree into something they couldn't laugh away. In that moment, I wasn't just defending my dreams, I was living them fully, boldly, out loud. As I stood there in the backyard, the sun catching on the edges of my painting and the scent of charred burgers lingering in the air, I felt an unfamiliar stillness settle over me. My mom's arms wrapped tightly around me, her tears soaking into the fabric of my dress, and Mia pressed into my side, her small frame shaking with excitement and relief. I held them both, my own chest rising and falling as if I had finally come up for air after years underwater. My dad hovered nearby, his face still flushed, his eyes unable to leave the painting. For a moment, I thought he might disappear back into the safety of his grill, back into the only language he knew, flipping burgers and fixing engines. But instead, he stepped closer, his movements hesitant, almost shy. He cleared his throat and ran a hand across his mouth, his voice low and rough when he finally spoke. "You really did it, huh?" he said, his eyes flickering up to meet mine for just a heartbeat. I nodded, unable to find my voice, so I let the truth hang between us, strong and solid like steel. He gave a small, sharp nod, and though it wasn't an apology or a grand declaration of love, it was something. Maybe even everything I had been waiting to hear all these years. Brian stayed seated, staring at the ground, his shoulders hunched as if he was trying to fold himself smaller and smaller. I didn't feel anger toward him anymore, In that moment, he looked like a child caught sneaking cookies, all bravado gone, left only with the truth that he had no cheap jokes left to hide behind. The aunts and uncles who had joined in on his laughter before now avoided my gaze, suddenly finding great interest in their paper plates and soda cans. The silence felt like a balm on my skin, cool and clarifying. It was as if they were finally seeing me, seeing what I had fought for in quiet rooms when they thought I was wasting my time. The questions started coming, softly at first. My mom asked what the collector was like, how they found my work, where the painting was going. One uncle asked if I had a website, if he could see more of my art. Even my dad asked, in a low voice, if I planned to do more pieces like this. Each question felt like a small door creaking open, each one proof that they were starting to realize the world I had been living in wasn't some fragile fantasy. It was real, strong, and mine. Mia stood beside me like a bright flame, jumping in to fill the gaps when I stumbled, adding stories about my late-night painting sessions, the shows she had attended where barely anyone showed up, but I kept painting anyway. She told them how I cried after rejections, but always got up the next day to start again. Hearing her say those things out loud made me realize how deeply she had been paying attention all along. I felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it made my knees weak. As the sun dipped lower and the sky turned orange and pink, the energy in the backyard shifted. People started coming over to the painting, tracing the brushstrokes lightly with their eyes, asking about the colors and the story behind it. My mom wiped her tears and helped serve the salad I had brought, placing a scoop onto every plate even though she knew some wouldn't eat it. It felt like she was making a quiet statement of support, a small but mighty rebellion against all the years of polite silence. When I finally sat down, Mia collapsed beside me, resting her head on my shoulder. She whispered, "You changed everything today." And I knew she was right. I thought back to every lonely morning in my studio, the quiet hum of the city waking up outside my window, while I fought with a blank canvas, the times I considered quitting, the rejections that cut deeper than I ever admitted. All those moments had led me here, to this backyard, to this stunned silence, turned into something close to reverence. Looking around, I realized that the biggest lesson wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about finally standing tall enough to show them my truth, whether they accepted it or not. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had built a world so full and vivid that their doubts couldn't reach it. But seeing them finally pause, finally look, finally listen, it felt like a new chapter had cracked open. I turned to the camera in my mind, to the people I knew would watch this story unfold. If I could tell them one thing, it would be this. Your dream doesn't need permission. It doesn't need polite applause or safe nods. It needs your commitment, your stubborn heart, and your belief in its worth, even when no one else sees it. One day, the same voices that mocked you might fall silent, and in that hush, you'll hear the sound of your own power echoing back at you. I stood up, hugged Mia tighter, and looked around the backyard one last time, knowing that today I didn't just win an argument, I reclaimed my voice,